Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. It's Bill Bartholomew here with you, as always the case. A pleasure to spend some time with you here on the show. And yeah, it is December and we are rapidly approaching the end of year, sort of year in review episodes that we typically do here on the podcast. And I've got some great panels lined up, some exit interviews with outgoing elected officials, and some other really interesting stuff on the way as well. Something special for the last episode of the year before we head to a little bit of a break, and we'll be back for Season 6. That is an utterly shocking statistic. Season 6 in January, and I've got some stuff in store for that as well. Some new formats, and you never know what's going to happen here in B-Town, right? That's kind of the idea. So number one thing is thank you to all the listeners out there for your support over the years as we continue to move along here on the Bartholomew Town Podcast. So yesterday, I had an amazing opportunity. I have to say, I was completely blown away. I got invited to go to an event at New England Tech, which was actually an event for the Greene School, which is a charter school located in West Greenwich. And this event was amazing. Like, I left completely overjoyed by the interactions that I had with the students and even in the teachers and administrators. But I have found through various things, whether it's conversations here on the podcast, conversations out in the field, different protests and sort of organized movements, some of the schools that I've been invited to speak at, some of the schools that have actually interviewed me for different things. And really last night, was just oh my God. Gen Z, if you didn't know it, if you haven't heard, is incredible. I know, of course, some of you are like, well, wait a minute, not everyone is. Well, yeah, of course. But, what I mean as a whole, just the amount of information and the courage and willingness to address head on without sort of, trying to duck or dodge issues to please somebody. Really taking on major issues in our society in a mature way, in an informed way. It's something that is a pattern that I've noticed. And last night, I was invited to this event at New England Tech where the Greene School, several dozen students presented their final product from a major project called The Code, which is, I'm going to play you the intro from one of the students' podcasts, because that's what this project was all about. Each student created their own podcast on a major social justice or current affairs issue. And then they stood in groups and you kind of went around from one station to the next, and some of the students would explain what their podcast was about, so on and so forth, and then they would take questions. And I asked questions to several of these students, and I'm going to play those for you here in this episode today because these kids just, they're just doing such a great job of digging into issues. And you always want to hear the perspective of those who are impacted by a particular issue. And in some cases, there's a direct impact here. In some cases, there's an indirect impact. In other words, it's just that you've got a younger generation that's going head on into some of these major issues. So in either case, I was just completely impressed. But I want to play you here. This is an intro from one of the students' podcasts. It kind of sets up what happens, or the idea of the project itself. And then I'm going to go through, I'm just going to play some audio that I got last night out in the field. And kudos to the Greene School, to the staff there, the teachers, the administration. They have done some really, really good work. And it's just completely obvious, even just by spending 2 hours at this event last night, just how much of a community they've built. And I'll tell you right now, I try not to reflect with any sort of negativity on my own public school experience. But I know for someone like me, having the type of community, the type of discussions, the type of issues, the type of environment that I saw last night at the Greene School, that I've seen in other scenarios as well. I've seen it at the Met School. I've seen it in other places as well. It makes me go, okay, I'm so relieved that for a certain type of kid, or at least a certain energy, or a certain situation or a certain need, that there are places for them to thrive. And that's what I saw last night, was kids thriving. So enough of me. Let's hear from the students right now. This is an intro from one of the podcasts that, by the way, you can find these podcasts. I'll try to find a way to link it on Twitter. I guess go to tgsri.org. That's the easiest link to find the Greene School itself. But here's an intro from one of the podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Lucy Palmer, and I'm a student at the Greene School in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. The Greene School is a charter school, an expeditionary learning school. And if you don't know what expeditionary learning is, that means that once a year, we pick a topic to really study in depth. And this year, our expedition was named The Code. And for our expedition, we studied MLK's 6 Steps to Nonviolent Change and social codes across different minority groups and as society as a whole, and just all things like that related to social codes. But we also studied different social justice movements and civil rights movements around these social codes and around these minority groups. Then, as a final product, we were assigned to write a research article on one civil rights issue that stuck out to us, that we could be connected to, that we could research and write about, and felt like we could talk about a change that could be made to it.
And talking about those changes is something that they proved quite capable of. Take, for example, this discussion on gun violence. Gun violence is definitely one of the most forward-facing issues that we all face, but in school in particular, it's this, it's something that you've had to grow up with, that even in my generation, although it was there, it wasn't the same. How has it impacted your day-to-day life, especially as a student right now? And if you could say your name, but when you answer it as well.
I'm Anaya. Maybe feeling like scared to go to school sometimes because you never know what's going to happen or who's going to bring what to school. Being scared of what's going to happen to me next.
Anybody else on that?
Yeah, I'm Maxwell Brooks, and there's definitely obviously certain people at school you might be worried about what they're capable of because you never really know. Nowadays, with all the shootings that everybody's kind of listening to and hearing about, especially at schools, I feel like it's kind of become more of a normality in the U.S.
Wow.
So
that's crazy to think about, right?
Yeah, it is. So people are when they hear about another shooting, it doesn't really hit the same as it would have, maybe 3 to 5 years ago.
Sure.
So
become numb to it. Of kind of,
yeah.
You were shaking your head, you're nodding your head. Well,
I agree.
And your name?
State the question. I'm so sorry.
Well, sure. I'll even just expand on it. What's it like growing up in this era where there's all these school shootings and it doesn't really seem like there's major steps being taken to curb the availability of guns, and also the mental health component, which you've raised in at least some of these podcasts you've created? What does that do to you when you go to school every morning? I can't imagine it because I didn't experience it at the same level. And your name?
My name is Irie, and I think that we shouldn't have to worry about things like that. There should already be more restrictions on guns because there's been a lot of cases where people are just shooting up schools for no apparent reason. It's either because they're lonely or sad, and that really affects other people and families, and things like the NRA things like the ATF, things like the ATF are being suppressed and underfunded with things to help have more gun restrictions, and
right.
It's not really happening.
So, last question here is, and feel free to say there's no limitation on answer, but so you're in 11th grade, so it's kind of cheesy to say it, but you're the future, you're also the present, but what do you say to people who are not taking this issue as seriously and are kind of balancing, politics and, the Second Amendment, which they're all legitimate things to address in there. But what do you say from your standpoint? Because obviously this is a pressing issue. You've made all these podcasts about it. You're focused on it. What do you say to people that you don't think are listening to your age group on this issue?
My name is Rowan Berry, and I would say that it is an overlooked issue. I feel like the Second Amendment should be more regulated, and it's the right to bear arms, but I feel like that we should control who can buy the guns rather than the guns being emitted.
Nationally, you're saying, not just state by state.
Yes. Since
Gun at 18, which is very.
And you can't even like drink legally until you're 21. So I mean, I feel like those two. I mean, obviously both are really apparent issues, but I feel like at the fact that all the deaths that are happening every day in America, from shootings and stuff like that, I feel like the two are kind of. It's just a little crazy in my opinion.
I believe.
And your name, sorry?
My name is Devin Frias. I believe if there were less guns being produced, there would be less killings and less homicides.
So sometimes people make this argument, oh, well, people would just use other things. Like they would take that ATM over there and throw it at somebody. I don't know if that's a terrible example, but, like it illustrates what people say. You don't think that's true. You think guns are fundamentally central to all the violence that's happening.
To access. They're very easy to access.
I mean,
So
and your name, sorry?
my name is Matthew Ariza, and I think it's sad to think that this country, in this country, students will go to school afraid, thinking that their life could be taken at any moment. And in other countries, they don't have to worry about that because they know that there's strict gun laws over there, and they know that their life won't be taken by a gun so quickly as here in this country because of the gun laws over there.
Some of the issues that were discussed were acute issues like school resource officers. Our governor, Dan McKee, is in favor of school resource officers. Based on your project, what would you say to him if he was here right now?
My name's Hannah Thorpe, and student resource officers do not necessarily help with student education in schools. They actually make it a lot more difficult for students to succeed in the school setting because a lot of students have trauma with police, and it makes it a lot harder for them to have a good time in schools, have an easier time. Like a lot of students who don't have that trauma, they don't have that issue, but a lot of them do have that trauma with their family and don't want to, and are PTSD effects, and they don't. PTSD. Can you start over? I don't know.
Definitely. Although you sounded great.
I did? Okay.
I think it sounds awesome. I mean,
Okay, I'm sorry.
it's very well articulated.
Well, students with PTSD with police officers are going to have a much harder time in school with police officers there. So instead of maybe funding school resource officers, they should try to fund school social workers for these students that are having issues in school, for them to go speak to, and maybe just have programs for these students that are having issues with maybe behavioral issues, because these students with behavioral issues, there's always a reason, and sending students, having school resource officers in schools increases the rate of student arrests, and the majority of the student arrests are the kids with behavioral issues, and instead of being arrested, they deserve to have someone to talk to and figure out their issues, because they don't deserve to have the rest of their lives ruined because of something that's going on with them during their school lives.
There's a Providence student organized group called Counselors Not Cops. I don't know if you reached out to them or not at all, but
They responded.
gotcha. I'll try to connect you with them as well.
Well, the student resource officers. Yeah, that's it.
That's like the best ending I've ever heard in my life. Thank you. It literally is. I can see the imaginary mic. I kind of want to throw my phone just for the sake of it. An area that has really jumped out into the mainstream over the course of this year, and really dating back over the last few years, has been sexual education and how to manage it inside the school setting. It's something that has become really a focal point in what I would even describe as a culture war issue, and that's somewhat shocking. But to hear students themselves, especially those who have been most impacted by perhaps inadequate sexual education at the right age, was a really powerful experience. But there's people out there, and I think they're a very small minority, but they would argue that sexual health education in schools, at least certain aspects of some of the things that you each just talked about is inappropriate. Some people, say, oh, it's grooming, and it's framed as something that's wrong. But you're positioning this as the complete opposite, as something that's necessary. What would your response be to somebody, like, just quickly, if they said, hey, I completely disagree with this type of sexual education in the home or specifically in the school? I don't know who wants to answer that first or at all. And your name, sorry.
My name is Noah, and what I believe is that though a lot of people find that sexual topics should not be taught to their children, you're never too young to be abused. And 1 in 6 victims are unfortunately under the age of 6, and it's usually a family member. We need to let our children know, because this could save their lives. Sexual assault gives children PTSD that will affect their development seriously. They will be struggling with mental illness the rest of their lives. And sometimes sexual violence could lead to lethal violence. They could be hurt seriously and killed. For me personally, if I did not receive sexual education about abuse within the 5th grade, which I've already stated was too late for me to have that prevention. If I hadn't known about that, I most likely would have been raped or worse. It's important to protect your children in that way, and though it's uncomfortable and it's a topic that is taboo, children, they will be hurt if we don't let them know that what's happening around them is not okay.
You have any thoughts on that? Same idea, and also the self-actualization component that is integral to understanding the things you just talked about with respect to sexual health and education. And I'm sorry, your name?
My name is Monica. I think when people hear that the idea that sex education should come earlier in life, they often think that it's full on talking about intercourse, when it's really just the prevention of abuse, talking about what your parts are, talking about what is appropriate and not appropriate, and what is safe. And having that understanding at a young age prevents abuse happening later in life. And even if it doesn't prevent it, it helps this person have the knowledge to be able to reach out and ask for help. I know if I had better sex education as a young child, I would have had a better experience going into being a teenager and having being a survivor myself. I've found that
Please, take your time.
Having that education at a young age could have probably prevented what happened.
You're very brave for talking about this and researching it. And also very informed, and that continued on in a discussion on homelessness. Let's be honest about it, as it's gotten colder and as controversy has surrounded a little bit anyway, the McKee administration with respect to whether or not sufficient beds are being delivered, students at the Greene School took this issue head on and were able to really dig in deep and have a framework for how to move forward with this issue. Rhode Island right now, one of the big stories for sure is the homeless crisis, the crisis of the unhoused. There was a protest last night at the State House during the lighting of the holiday tree, and a lot of advocates are they're not convinced that with the additional beds that are being rolled out and with the services that are already being deployed, a lot of unhoused people and their advocates are saying the governor has let them down and just we're not doing enough. So based on all the work that you've done on economic justice, what would you say right now if you had a chance to talk to not just the governor, but anybody in power who could, kind of overnight, just what would you say if you happen to be on an elevator with them? You only got 10, 20 seconds. What do you tell them?
Do you want to start, Luke? I think you have a good number on this. $1 per.
Sure, yeah. So,
And your name, just so.
I'm Kyle Roberts, speaker, and thank you for this opportunity, by the way.
Of course, yeah.
This
Thank
is
you for the work
wonderful.
you're doing.
Yeah. So right now, to provide temporary transitional shelter, which is not a permanent fix, let's be clear on that, but it solves the housing crisis, temporarily speaking, with pallet houses, which are coming out of Seattle, costing $7,500 a piece, sitting on a $400 million COVID relief bill. It would cost $1.8 million for heated shelters to house every single Rhode Islander sitting outside, or living outside, sleeping outside right now, including 68 families. And this is just a kind of a minuscule amount of money compared to the fact that homelessness is the second biggest displacement or just the second biggest negative byproduct of COVID, as opposed number one being just actual COVID deaths.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the pallet housing are a solution for sure. Anybody else have? That's kind of a huge start right there.
My name?
Yeah, please.
My name's Joshua Bowater. I would, if the question was what I said at the
Well, yeah. If the governor happened you had 10 seconds with him, you're on an elevator. What do you just say to make it? Sort of reinforce your position here.
I would say use the powers that were given to you. To be honest, I would say there's lots of bills. If you go to RI Kids Count, which was my expert speaker, I had someone from RI Kids Count, which is an organization in Rhode Island that really aims at helping children. This in general, I think, regardless of party, regardless of partisan affiliation, I think we all can agree that kids should have the same opportunities as wealthy and even poor kids and wealthy kids have the same opportunities to succeed.
Sure.
I think that's just how I think everyone can agree with that in a sense. But what I don't think people realize is that I think we just don't do enough in that sense.
Can I quickly credit who I got that information
Please,
from, by
yeah.
the way?
Yep.
Yeah, so Professor Eric Hirsch from Rick. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Providence College, actually.
Yeah, PC?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
You.
Maybe you're right, maybe I'm right.
It said at Providence EDU.
Providence College, yeah.
Yes, but then someone else said Rick, so I was unsure on that, but thank you.
Yeah, whatever. A professor up there in Providence somewhere.
Well,
we'll go by municipality.
He was an immense help, and he told me about the protest. I wish I could have gone. But yeah, I want to credit him and say thank you to him.
And that's Professor Eric Hirsch of Providence College that he's referencing. The last topic that I interviewed kids on this wonderful evening, going around checking out the different podcast projects that these students at the Greene School created, was the issue of immigration. And look, this is so vast. There's so many ways to frame this, so many ways to look at it. So I was interested in the personal experience of some of these students and also what they've learned about immigration policy as it shifted in recent times. So check this out. What has your work in all these different aspects of immigration shown that, I guess, how we've ended up in this weird and seemingly unfair and divisive moment?
Well, as a whole, our system...
Sorry, your name?
Oh, hello, I'm Duncan McMurray. As a whole, our system is systemic racism for the majority of our system. Immigration is no different. As I was talking about earlier, European white immigrants were treated very differently. They're processed differently. They allowed more of them to come in. But when more Latin Americans decided to come in, they put up harsher legislation. The only way to really try to change the systemic racism is to continue to talk about these issues so we can pass further legislation. Because in the end, we can't really protest and do all these violent acts without talking peacefully.
Anybody else on just that general idea of how do we get here where this is such a divisive issue? Why is this such a big deal to so many people? And why have so many or certain groups of immigrants been marginalized so extremely? And if you could say your name.
My name is Chelsea, and to be honest, I think the fact is that people when they see immigrants come in, they think about the fact oh, they're gonna steal our jobs, or oh, they're only gonna be here to cause trouble, because some of them are called gangbangers, rapists, because of the countries they come, and sometimes they fled the countries that they come from because bad stuff are going to happen to them, or they want to give their kids a better life. And I feel like people just target them because they don't speak like a certain language we do, and they don't act like the certain way we do. Because a lot of immigrants are very hard workers, and they work in like factories, they work in places that other people don't work, and they judge them based off appearance and how they act.
Sure. What about your own experiences, in life? Are any of you first generation or second generation Americans, and has that impacted you at all? Like, anybody have any experiences there?
My name is Kevin, and I have a little bit of experience with that. So my family comes from a pretty long line of immigrants because they're Salvadorian. So they came because both of my parents were born in the time of the Civil War going on over there.
Sure.
And that Civil War tended to create a lot of problems for citizens, the government, and the both groups fighting in that war. And a lot of that led to many people being in poverty, with their homes being destroyed and everything they own disappearing in far sight. And those people left El Salvador in like the 80s and 90s just so they can have a better life. And that's where I think a lot of poverty plays into what's going on with immigration.
Sure. And do you think that today, you look at President Biden versus President Trump, are we still, it's better, there's no question in terms, I think anybody would agree with that, unless you're like some kind of xenophobe, some kind of racist, you would agree it's better. But are we even close to where we need to be in terms of not even just the entrance into the country, but, just the general vibe of the role, the relationship that we all have, immigrants and I guess what you say, natural-born citizens. Are we close?
My name's Chelsea, and I think when Trump was in president, he created the zero tolerance policy, and I feel like that had a big impact because at the border he would separate families and children, and he would take them apart and put them in certain detentions. And now in 2022, when President Joe Biden, when he became president, he stated that he was gonna take that law off, and he created the reunification tax. So I feel like even now that he's been becoming president, we've been better since families have been together, and he's like allowing people to like giving them shelters and stuff, giving them better than what Donald Trump had, because kids wouldn't be in contact with their parents for days and also weeks, and some kids weren't old enough to like take care of themselves, like give themselves like what they needed, and some children didn't have good toiletries or like bedding, and they would like be covered in dirt. Some would be put in cages. So like overall, I feel like we've seen a big effect that we've been better without Donald Trump.
Especially through legislation. The U.S. Citizen Act has been passed, or is trying to be passed by Joe Biden, which allows immigrants to come in for 5 years and then eventually get a green card as long as they do illegal access.
One last question here real quick, just kind of like a 5-second thing anybody wants to answer. What's the biggest thing you've learned about immigration in the U.S. from doing these podcasts here and also life experience, but just what's something that you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience that I have?
My name is Marilee, and I learned that in the 1800s there was a literacy test that people would have to take, mostly immigrants, to come into the United States.
A literacy test?
Yeah.
Do you think that's fair?
No, I don't feel like it's fair because...
Do you think most Americans today could pass a literacy test?
Yes, they probably can because they...
You're generous. Yeah.
Yes, that they were born here.
Yeah. My thanks to the staff and students of the Greene School for inviting me to this awesome event, the Code Final Product Showcase over at New England Tech. And look, you can just tell when an organization is special, when there's respect, when there's understanding, when there's empathy, when there's intelligence and passion. And they've built something special over there at the Greene School. You can just tell. It's one of those things, you just feel it. And boy, did I feel it last night with the, especially some of these kids, man. Like, in fact, everybody that I talked to last night, and I talked to dozens of kids last night. They were engaged. And at the end of the day, that is such a powerful reality, because I don't know about you, but I feel like that is front and center to so many of the issues that we have with our society is lack of engagement. And when you plug in, when you gain an understanding of what's actually in front of you, what's actually happening in real time, it's so much simpler, if nothing else, to develop a framework around a particular issue and to deploy empathy and mutual respect. All of these things that are really basic but seem to be lacking for some reason in a lot of aspects of our society. So I really enjoyed the event. And again, kudos to the Greene School for this one. And thanks to all of you who have listened all the way through this episode, because, we talked to, we talked to the governor, we talked to senators, we talked to business leaders, we talked to arts leaders, we talked to media leaders, we talked to activists and nonprofits and so many components of our society here in Rhode Island, right, and beyond, but specifically in Rhode Island. We talked to academic leaders. We talked to scientists, newsmakers of all stripes. And to hear the voices of high school students on some of the very same issues that we cover day in, day out here on Bartholomew Town throughout the various platforms and whatnot. It's just so powerful. It's so invigorating. It's so exciting. And it was so much fun last night, too, because I met some parents who, in one case, was on the podcast in the past, a couple of other people who listened. One guy came up to me, he was like, I listened to the show on the radio on Saturdays. I was like, wow, that's an interesting entry point, and it's relieving to know that there's people who access this through a variety of different platforms. But the number one thing is that the issues themselves, to think that the engagement is happening, high school students, college students, young adults, middle-aged adults, everybody throughout the age spectrum, the demographic spectrum, not just through Bartholomew Town, but is just engaged in issues, and we just have to stick together. Because I really do believe there's a lot more of us than those naysayers would ever want you to believe, and they'll do what they can to go out of their way to make it seem like if you care deeply about some of these issues, you're somehow part of a small minority, when I do, in fact, believe the opposite is true. And it's just about getting more and more and more people engaged. And youth, that is the space where this type of engagement is really, really going to go viral. Not viral necessarily in the sense of like on TikTok, although that helps too, right? But viral in the real world. Politics, activism, engagement with issues is something that is culturally relevant. It's something that really, in the wake of the BLM protests of 2020, shifted from what I would say would be an on and off type of engagement level by many people to a full-on focal point of daily lives for many, many people. And not only with these types of social justice issues, but just the day-to-day reality of our society. We are in a moment where it is critical that we just keep getting more people on board with the important issues. And that is why it is so powerful and so special to see kids. And when I say kids, I mean high school kids, I mean college students, Gen Z, engaged in these issues, and not just in a, let's burn the system down and start from scratch way, but how can we maneuver in the system? If you guys have been listening for a long time, close to 500 episodes, I don't know how many radio shows and TV shows and social media posts and tweets and whatnot. If there's one theme that I have never actually said out loud, but I have tried to convey, it is how can we work within the existing system to make change. There are some things that we can't, but there are a lot of things that we can. That is the real center of impact right now, the realistic way to move the ball forward. And I'm just so happy to see the students of the Greene School engaged in that exact work. Okay, so we'll have another episode this week. I know it's Friday. I'm going to put 2 up today. Of course, you may be listening to this on WPRO on Saturday, which means go to ripodcast.com or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can find every episode of the show. Next week, we've got a lot on the table. including what I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to be on location for an exit interview with a politician, an elected leader who is leaving elected office, and we're going to go through, and I think I'm expecting to have a powerful interview, maybe even an emotional one, with this leader, plus some conversations on deck as well with, I've actually got a great friend of mine coming from Brooklyn, who's going to talk about some major issues and breakthroughs that he's made, and so on and so forth. I think that's going to be a really interesting discussion. And like I said, coming up, we'll have our year in review reporters roundtable. We're going to have a review of the year in public health, another roundtable, the year in arts, yet another roundtable, and much more. So as always, thank you all. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.